Okay, assalamu alaikum everybody. Good evening. My name is Zaid Abed Wahid. Most of you probably don't know me. I am your moderator or chair for the evening. I'm the former Debating Society president from the University of Salford, as well as the former ISOC president from the University of Salford. My role this evening is to ensure that a meaningful and intellectual debate occurs between these two gentlemen to my right. And to introduce them, on the far right is, not politically, is Imran Hussein, lecturer, instructor, and philosopher on Islamic thought. And to my, also to the right, but not far right, is John Richards, retired science teacher, by his own words, minor politician, author, and representative of the Atheist Alliance International. So the format for the evening's debate is as follows. Each side will have 20 minutes to introduce their point. There will be a 10-minute rebuttal from either side, followed by a 15-minute discussion between both sides on this table over here, and 8-minute closing remarks followed by questions and answers. With regards to questions and answers, please join the Slido over there and send your questions in anonymously, and we will try and get through as many of the most relevant ones as we can, as quickly as we can towards the end. As you can probably see from the top of the slide, the evening's topic is life absurd without God? So before we begin, just some rules for the audience. Yes, there are rules for you. As I said, please do save your questions for the Q&A section. Don't shout them out, just type them up and we'll see if we can get to them. Use the link provided and try to keep them as clear and as on topic as possible to avoid me rambling on trying to understand your parables. Secondly, please be respectful to the speakers and to each other. If you agree on a point, let it be known by clapping or doing that weird jazz hand thing that Manchester students do. Please, no boos, cheering, shouting, takbirs, none of that, please. I'm serious. I'm not John Bercow. This is not the Houses of Parliament. Let's keep it professional. So with all that out of the way, I think that's pretty much everything, yes? So let's start with our first speaker to give their introduction, Imran Hussein.
Okay, Bismillah and Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon all of you. Now, the topic at hand is a very, very interesting topic tonight, which is life absurd in the absence of God? It's a very interesting question. It's a very pressing question because the way I want to look at it tonight is, that if you deny God, if you turn away from God, if you reject God, and you claim to be an atheist or a naturalist, and I'm going to define my terms just so we're clear here. When I say atheist, I'm referring to those individuals that, generally speaking, say there is no God, there is no creator, no gods for that matter. And a naturalist is someone who would say, well, all that exists is the physical material world. There is nothing beyond the physical. It's all matter. And everything can be explained via physical causes, right? So most atheists, as is understood by Richard Dawkins, most atheists are naturalists. Now, I'd like to know what John's position is tonight as well. It would help resulting in a more of a fruitful discussion from that perspective. But if you adopt atheism or naturalism, what implications does that have on your life? Now, what I'm going to be suggesting tonight is that life becomes absurd from almost every single perspective. And the way I want to look at this initially is from the perspective of the things that really matter to us as human beings. The deeper questions of life, such as, what is my purpose? What is my ultimate purpose? Let's begin with this question for a second. The question of purpose, the question of ultimate purpose is something that has been around for we don't know how long, God knows how long, right? It's been there from the beginning of time, if you like. Philosophers, thinkers, they've engaged with this question. They've asked this question. They've tried to figure out the answers to this question. And this is a question that many of us ask today. What is the purpose of my existence? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And what I want to suggest here is that if you adopt atheism or naturalism, there is no answer. There is no ultimate purpose to your existence. Now, before I sort of discuss this any further, let me just highlight that when you say you're an atheist or a naturalist, you are denying a creator, a cause. And essentially what you are saying otherwise, or in another way of looking at it, is that everything is a result of random physical processes. Atoms and molecules have been whizzing around for God knows how many years, obviously pun intended here, God knows how long. Atoms and molecules whizzing around at random have been colliding into each other and have resulted in everything that we see in existence today. And I want us to really think about this for a second. Essentially, everything we see in existence today is one big accident. It's an accidental byproduct of lengthy processes, random, cold, physical processes that have been taking place at random and have resulted in everything we see in existence today. And that includes ourselves. And if that is the case, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, if that is the case, then where is the ultimate purpose? Accidents don't have a purpose. You spill milk, it's spilt milk. It doesn't have a purpose. It wasn't intended. There is no ultimate purpose on atheism or naturalism. Now, you may be thinking, this guy, he looks like he's Pakistani, maybe Asian, he's been practicing all of his life. Well, that wasn't the case. I also found myself in a position in my life at a point where I questioned life. I was at the place where it wasn't even a question about whether God exists or not. I was in a place where I wasn't concerned about the question whether God exists or not. I was just too busy, like most of us are these days. So from one perspective, I was an atheist. You can see me as someone that lived like an atheist or a naturalist. And I found myself in the very same position because what I realized was if you logically follow through with the implications of atheism and naturalism, that's what we're discussing here. If you logically follow through with the implications, you end up at the realization that there is no ultimate purpose to existence. And that creates a lot of angst. It creates a lot of anxiety inside the human being. I suffered from anxiety and depression related to these existential questions for a very long time. And I thought through these things as well, and I tried to find answers. But I realized that logically speaking, there were no answers, at least to start off with the question of purpose, ultimate purpose. Now, what do I do in this position, I thought to myself? And as to have many philosophers throughout history, what do we do when you end up in this position? Now, there are a few ways people have tried to deal with this type of existential nihilism, if you like, that there is no ultimate purpose to life. One of the ways was, you had the existentialist philosophers, and what they suggested, at least most of them, they said, look, you end up in a position where there is no purpose to life. You recognize this, acknowledge this. But now what you have to do is you have to live with purpose. You have to give yourselves purpose. You have to make purpose up for yourselves. And they would present this idea in a very eloquent and uplifting way. And to be honest, when you're in that position, there's only so much you could do. So I commend them for that. However, the thing about human nature is we don't like to be lied to. And we don't like lying to ourselves. And essentially what we're doing is when we say, I have no ultimate purpose, but I'm going to give myself purpose, what we're essentially doing is we're saying, I'm going to make purpose up. I'm going to make purpose up for myself. In other words, if you want to look at it in a crude way, we're actually lying to ourselves just to get by. And that didn't sit well with me. It didn't work for too long, right? And it doesn't work for many people. So that doesn't work. And the other alternative, if you like, was you can reduce it down to biology. You can say, well, I've evolved and I'm here. And the only purpose to my existence, this accidental existence, is to propagate my genes, as Richard Dawkins would have you believe in the selfish gene. Now, if you want to reduce it to such a level, then be my guest, do that. But that's no different from eating and sleeping. We do these things anyway. But yet we still ask the deeper questions of life. What is the purpose of my existence? And what's really funny is recently I watched a clip by Richard Dawkins. And he's gone even further with his understanding in regards to the purpose of our material existence, at least. And he even says that the human being, we're nothing but just disposable, and I'm paraphrasing his words, we're just nothing but disposable machines for our genes. Now, well, that's going to really help us finding our ultimate purpose, right? That type of outlook, right? So that didn't really help me. And that didn't work for me either. So now I'm thinking, okay, there seems to be no avenue here as to, or way I can take out of this conundrum, out of this problem. So I thought, you know what, maybe value is what I need to think about. Human life is valuable, it's sacred. We all acknowledge this, we all realize this, we all understand this. Even atheists and naturalists understand this. Humanism, it's based on one of the tenets, the fundamental tenets is that human life is sacred, it's valuable. So I said, you know what, I have no purpose to live, but life being valuable, that should be enough to keep me going. Well, when I inquired and I thought about the question of value, you soon realize that again on atheism and naturalism, there is no special value to human life. Now, let me just give you guys an example just to put things into perspective. We have a pen here, a very nice Manchester University, I believe it's by someone else, or whoever it's by. It's a nice little purple pen in my hand, right? If I was to ask you guys, what's more valuable, me or this pen? What would you say? I want you to think about it for a second. Most of us, hopefully all of us, would say, well, you're more valuable, right? Imagine if I put you guys in a situation and I said, look, or imagine hypothetically for a second that you guys suffer from a particular condition. You have an anger problem which can't be resolved by any medication. So what the doctors told you is that whenever you get angry, you have to express your anger. And to do that, he's given you a hammer to carry around with you. Okay? I know it's a bit of a crazy example, but just go with it for a second, yeah? You've got a hammer in your pocket. And imagine for some reason you get really angry right now and you have a choice to make. You have a choice to make between smashing me as a human being and smashing this pen. What would you smash? It's a question. What would you guys smash? Yeah, hopefully everyone will say the pen, right? It's because we realize, it's almost intuitive that human life is valuable and precious. Yet what I'm positing to you here is that on naturalism and atheism, and when we understand this, like I said, it all boils down to what? Blind, random physical processes. There is literally no difference between me and the pen. Now, on hearing this, you may be outraged. You may think, what is he talking about? You're conscious, you're rational, you feel, you're a human being, right? You're alive. We'll say all of these things. We're probably thinking of these things right now. Now, I can understand the sentiments that we have. However, let's not get sentimental because at the end of the day, there's no difference. It's just one arrangement of atoms and molecules as opposed to another. And these ideas that you may be just firing off in your heads right now, that he's more conscious, he's more valuable, he's rational, he's intelligent, hopefully you think he's intelligent, but whatever the case is, all of these things that you think, these are simply, on atheism and naturalism, these are simply ideas that you may have picked up from society, may have thought up in your minds right now, but they have no intrinsic value because they are a result of nothing but chemical firings in your brain, which are a result of atoms and molecules. That's all it is. So essentially, there is no difference. There's no need to get sentimental about this. There's no difference between me, the pen, the table, the chair, the computer, or anything else. The only difference is that these are just different arrangements of matter. That's all it is. Now, hopefully we can start to appreciate something here, which is that on atheism and naturalism, the human being is being pushed into a corner. You're being reduced down or reduced to the point where you can't even account for those things you know to be true as a human being. The things that make you human, purpose, value. But if you can't make sense of these things anymore, at least we should realize there's a bit of a disparity. There's something that's not adding up. This worldview or outlook or ideology, whatever you want to call it, because I know some atheists have a problem me calling atheism an ideology or a worldview. Whatever you want to call it, it has implications, and the implications here are that it strips you from being able to account for those very things you know to be true as a human being. And that is problematic. That is highly problematic. We've seen some of the atrocities that such views have resulted in throughout history, and we can see or potentially think of problems that such views can cause in the future. Now, I'm talking about logical implications here, guys, right? I'm not just talking about wishy-washy things. I'm saying let's logically think about it. And when you do, these are the conclusions you come to, right? Now, let's explore this a bit further. Something else which is very integral to human life, human beings, which are ethics, morals. As human beings, almost every action we take is a moral and ethical action. It has implications, moral implications. And we consider this as human beings. However, what I want to suggest here is that on atheism and naturalism, there is no account for objective moral values and truths. Right? Now let me define what I mean by objective so we're very clear here. When I say objective moral values and truths, we're talking about objectivity, which means that it's not subject to the human being or human understanding. The morals are external to the human being. Right? Now from an Islamic perspective, which I'll discuss in a second, we can ontologically ground our morals in God. However, on atheism and naturalism, you don't have an anchor. It's just subjective. All you can do, well, what options do you have? Let's just engage with just think through some of the options we have on atheism and naturalism. Well, one of them is social consensus. Society comes together and decides what is wrong and what is right, and that's what we base our morals on. Well, hold on a second. Social consensus throughout history, we have seen examples of where the consensus of a society, for example, Nazi Germany, have resulted in some atrocious things, right? And if you were to say 10 or 15 people get together and say X is wrong, well, say 10 or 15 other people get together and say X is right. Who is right? There's no objectivity there. It's just subjective opinions against each other. Well, social consensus doesn't make morals or give us an objective foundation for morals. Well, what else is there? Well, you may say it's my own views and ideas. Again, it's your subjective opinions. You may want to reduce morals down to evolution, right? Now, obviously, if you look at the experts in the field, they will tell you that evolution doesn't give you morality. It may give you the tools you need to be able to come up with moral outlooks. However, evolution does not render morality objective in any way, shape, or form. Because if our morals are subject to evolution, they're subject to change. Darwin noticed something very interesting, and he mentioned this, where he highlighted that if we had evolved under different conditions, we would have a totally different moral outlook. Imagine, and he gives the example of hive bees. Sorry, John, I don't want to steal your water. Is that yours?
That's not mine. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Darwin gave a very beautiful example of hive bees, and he said, look, if we were reared under the same condition as hive bees, the mothers of the bees would think it a sacred duty to kill the fertile daughters, and no one would think anything of it. Hamza, in his book, The Divine Reality, makes another similar point. He says, look, if we had evolved under the same conditions as nurse sharks, we would find it okay to rape our partners, because that's what they do, and no one would think anything of it. So evolution does not render morality objective in any way, shape, or form. It's just subject to moral change. And I believe John in his book highlights, well, no one's saying, we've stopped evolving or morals have stopped evolving. So it shows it's still subject to change over time. So if you don't have evolution as an explanation for objective morality, then to be honest, there are some other ideas out there such as consequentialism, etc. And I may deal with that if John brings that up. But the point being is that on atheism and naturalism, you do not have an account for objective moral values and truths and duties. You're left with just morality being subjective. And what's the problem here? The issue here is then that if morality is just your subjective opinion, then it means nothing. Hence, when atheists point the finger towards religious people and towards Muslims and Islam, and based on their limited understanding of the text, assert certain things and make certain moral claims, and they express those claims as if they're objectively true, this is objectively wrong, this is bad, this is evil, well, they're not in any position to do so because they can't ground their morality in any objective way, in anything. That's highly problematic. Right? You can't have your cake and eat it. It doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to make claims, moral claims, you have to first ground or show us how you ground your morality, how you deem it to be objective, and how you make sense of that. That's if you accept morality is objective. And if you don't, well, then you're not in any position to make any claims anymore. So hopefully, you can see the picture developing now. There's loads of areas I can go into, but time doesn't permit me to do that. But hopefully we can start to appreciate how atheism and naturalism, as I've said before, it reduces you down to the point where you can't account for those very things that make you human. And that is the absurdity of atheism and naturalism. But unfortunately, many people don't follow through. Most atheists don't get the time to think about these realities and think about the logical implications of atheism and naturalism. Hence, they don't worry about these things. They're too busy. But I really encourage the atheists to really think about these realities, because these are the things that make you human, right? It's very important to think about these things. You can't dismiss them. Now, the last thing I want to touch upon is this whole idea of meaningful happiness. As human beings, we want to be happy. That's another integral aspect of our lives. We chase happiness. But again, on atheism and naturalism, you can't have meaningful happiness. And this is the reason why. Now, going back to my story, I found myself in a position where there's no ultimate purpose, there is no value to human existence, there's no grounding for objective morals. It's just all becoming meaningless for me at this point. So when I don't have answers to these fundamental questions, how can I expect to be happy in any meaningful way? Let me give you guys a bit of a thought experiment quickly. Imagine for a second you fall asleep right now, and as you fall asleep, you go into a really deep sleep, and you wake up, and the next thing you realize you're not in this auditorium anymore. You're on a train. and the train's traveling at 200 miles an hour down some track. The windows are closed, the doors are closed. What's the first questions that come to your mind? Who am I? Not who am I, where am I going? Who put me on the train? Where's the train going to stop? What's going on? And these questions will be natural to us and they'll cause a lot of anxiety. Now, as you're engaging with these questions, imagine for a moment you're presented with this amazing meal, a 5-star meal, and you taste the food and it's the most amazing food you've ever tasted. Now you may be temporarily distracted and experience a sense of joy and happiness, but is that going to last, firstly? And secondly, is that going to be a meaningful type of happiness or joy if you don't have the answers to those fundamental questions you've just asked as to how you got on the train and where it's going? No. And that's the reality of life. We have these pressing questions that we ask as human beings. It's a part of our nature to engage with these questions. Yet on atheism and naturalism, we find no answers. And that's highly problematic because here we find a contradiction between these outlooks on life and human nature itself. And at the very least, that should get us to question our position of atheism and naturalism. Because human beings don't like living a contradiction. Human beings don't like living in this state of dissonance. We need to find balance, and you're not going to find it. Your nature is never going to be in conformity with naturalism or atheism. Now, hopefully we can see that atheism, it just doesn't make sense of those most fundamental things we know to be true as human beings. Now, how does Islam answer the question? The next minute, just quickly. From the perspective of purpose, God says clearly in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. God answers the question of purpose. He created us to know Him and to worship Him. And what's beautiful about the Quran is that this is the purpose of our existence, and the entire Quran revolves around this fundamental message. It's all related to purpose. And that's amazing. In other words, the entire Quran revolves around the purpose of human existence. Not only tells us what our purpose is, but helps us and aids us in fulfilling it. Right? And that's something profound about the Quran. Also, from the perspective of value throughout the Quran, I'll give you maybe an example in my rebuttal, but throughout the Quran, God speaks about human value, how human life is sacred, how the children of Adam have been given this sacred value in and of themselves. God has created them as a special creation. So value, God gives us value from that perspective, and not only us value, but our actions value too, what we do and how we live our lives. Thirdly, when it comes to happiness, God says in the Quran, indeed, in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. They're very interesting, and this sort of highlights the internal coherence of the Quran here. When God says, in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest, I'm going to carry on in my rebuttal, hopefully. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I'm here on behalf of Atheist Alliance International that you sent the invitation to. And also thank you very much for coming. This wouldn't be much of an event without you. Now, I don't call myself an atheist. I call myself a non-believer. And from what Imran has just said, you'll understand perhaps why I do that. But I come in friendship. I'm an ex-science teacher, and I don't want to alienate my class. You outnumber me, and that would be a very foolish thing to do. Nevertheless, I may say some things that you find a bit challenging. I'm going to ask you some questions, first of all. Are you all believers? Put your hands up. Yeah, you're all believers. Are there any non-believers here? Okay, not many. Is there anyone here who is a non-believer but doesn't want to put their hand up? Thank you for that. So, here we go. Play sideshow. Okay, right. So, the question is life absurd without God? Or, get it your way around, is life without God absurd? Yes. Can I go home now? It is. And I also contend that it's not only absurd without God, but it's more absurd with God. And this question makes two assumptions. First of all, it assumes that there is a God. And secondly, it assumes that life shouldn't be absurd. Well, I want to examine those two propositions. The questioner obviously thinks that life shouldn't be absurd. And I'd like to ask why. Why do they think that? To my mind, that's the real question. Okay? So let's take a look at absurd, first of all, and find out what it means. Well, the dictionary gives wildly unreasonable, illogical, or inappropriate. Here's an example. The allegations are patently absurd. I say that's a judgment call, an opinion. For example, you and I might agree that that statement is absurd, wouldn't we? Yes? What about this one then? Is that so absurd? That you might think that's absurd, I might think that's absurd, somebody else might not. It really depends on whether the homework belongs to you or not. So it's a matter of opinion. Now, I would like to say that some of this comes from the fact of human egocentrism. We all live inside our heads looking out. So naturally, we think that we're at the center of everything. We used to think that our planet was at the center of the solar system and that the sun went round it. We now know that's not true. And we used to think that God made the universe for us. There is no evidence for this, and it's a very narcissistic viewpoint. Let's examine that claim. Did God make the universe for us? Is that a reasonable claim or is that an absurd statement? Well, we now know that the universe began around 13.8 billion years ago. We used to say it was 13.7. This is, of course, an estimate, and recently the estimate was improved, and we now say that it's 13.8. But mankind only arrived on Earth about 200,000 years ago. So, a reasonable question is, what happened in between? Why the gap of 13,799,800,000 years? Isn't that absurd? So, as an ex-science teacher, I want to go into a bit of scientific reality here. Scientific observed facts, repeatedly, shareably observed facts, and explanations, theories, which are mental models based on those facts. So, we know that Earth actually orbits the Sun. And we know that the Sun is a star. And it's a star in a galaxy that we call the Milky Way. You used to be able to look up and see it. It's a sort of whitish smudge across the sky. But now we pollute the sky, the night sky, with so much light, it's become invisible to us in Manchester. Now there's about 100 billion, some people say about 200 billion other suns in the Milky Way. And there's about 100 billion, some people say 200 billion other Milky Ways, galaxies like the Milky Way. And on average, thanks to the Hubble telescope, we found out that stars, other suns, also have planets orbiting them. In fact, on average, a star has about 7 planets. So, Earth is insignificant. It's only one planet out of about. Now, I can't say that number. It's even unimaginable. Let's try to imagine it. We've gone past the millions. The next 3 noughts will be billions. Then we go to trillions. I don't know, quadrillions, pentillions. I'm making it up now. Sesquillions. What is that number? Let's just try to imagine it. I want you to pretend that you can count up to 1 million. Now, to make this doable, I'm going to suggest that you count at the rate of 1 every second. Okay? Now, that's slow at the beginning. 1, 2, 3. But when you're getting close to 1 million, it takes you 999,999, 3 seconds just to say that one number. So let's average it. Let's say we're going to count throughout at the rate of 1 a second, and we're not going to go to sleep. But we are going to stop to eat and go to the toilet. How long do you think it would take to get up to 1 million? Any guesses?
2 weeks.
Somebody?
A few days.
How many days, sorry?
A few days.
A few days, right? Okay, that's one guess. Any other guesses?
21 years.
31 years, that's a very big guess. Any more? I'll take one more guess. Yes?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, spot on. You're a mathematician, eh? Well done. Yeah, it would take us about 2 weeks, not sleeping, but eating and pooing. Okay? That's just the 1 million. We've only gone up to the 6th nought from the right. If you want to count to 1 billion, that's 1,000 of those 2 weeks. So that's 40 years, counting at that rate, not sleeping. Okay? So imagine how long it's going to take to count up that number. The point I'm making is Earth is really, really insignificant. And meanwhile, on Earth, each one of us is just a single individual out of a total population of humans of 7.4 billion. It's probably more than that now, that's an old figure. So, however you look at it, numerically, we are monumentally insignificant, whether you compare us to the population or to the universe. Now let's take a look at our lives. Average human life is 79 years. Let's compare that to the life of the Earth. The Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years. The universe, as we said earlier, has been around for about 13.8 billion years. So however you look at it, whether in terms of time, duration, durability, or in terms of number, we are monumentally insignificant. We are ants. But, as Imran was explaining earlier, we're ants with delusions. We have delusions of our importance. We think there's some ultimate purpose for us. That's very conceited. So, are you important? Am I important? Now, are our opinions important? No. So, what actually is absurd? Thinking that we are important. That's absurd. It's a delusion of grandeur. So, let's go back to the question. Is life without God absurd? Well, we've dealt with absurd. Now let's deal with God. We found that most of you believe that there is one. I don't. But the questioner assumes that there must be a God. Now this is really a different debate, because we've moved on now from talking about whether life is absurd or not, in the same way that Imran moved on from talking about absurdity to talking about morality. So I'm going to talk about the evidence for God, and sadly there isn't any. As I said, it's another debate. But let's assume that I'm right. And if there is no God, then there's no option for life to be with God and therefore not be absurd because there is a God. Do you see that? There's a sort of a double negative there. If there is no God, we're stuck in a universe without God. Like it or not, it doesn't matter whether we're absurd or whether our lives are absurd. That's a judgment that nobody can make. There is no authority to decide, to have that opinion. Makes no sense to claim that without God, our lives are absurd. On the contrary, I would contend that life with God is more absurd. Let's look at what some believers do. Now, I know that you're all academics and you're all moderates, and I'm thankful for that because I don't want to be macheted. But you see the point. Some believers are fundamentalists. Some believers are radicalized. And the problem is, they get up to some pretty horrible stuff. Thank you. I'm not going to read these out. I'm going to assume you can read. You shouldn't be here if you can't. Some of those atrocities are committed because people believe that they have another life to go to. That this isn't their only existence. That thought devalues life itself. Because what's promised is magic. It's eternal. It's bliss. It's got everything you could wish for. So this life now is puny and trivial. And you can get up to all sorts of things here because it doesn't matter. All you've got to do is ask for your forgiveness and say a few prayers, and you will go up there where life is perfect forever. And that gives us the idea of martyrdom. The idea that we can live on after death devalues our real existence and takes away our responsibility to behave well towards each other. Assuming that you can die for a God, that dying for a God is a good thing, inspires mass murder. Let's take a look at it from my point of view. Wouldn't that be absurd? Look, here we have an atheist bomber who is dying to please no God. Somebody said, I forget who it was, that atheists have nothing to live for. It's the opposite. I think it was Ricky Gervais. It's the opposite. We have nothing to die for. You're the ones with the prize. I'm not. Here's another ridiculous slide. Look, this person thinks that she can please her God by committing atrocities. Then she has another thought. Hang on. What if there isn't one? And a very famous atheist said, I wouldn't die for a God. I might be wrong. Now, purpose. Imran talked a lot about purpose. It's part of this human egocentricity. It's a narcissistic assumption that we should have some sort of ultimate purpose. And to assume that it is somehow dispensed from above, downwards onto us. There's no evidence for that. The evidence shows that the development of sophistication and complexity is actually bottom up. Millions of years ago, billions of years ago, very simple creatures with next to no purpose other than bare survival existed. And what Imran did was he conflated together all of life in one, thank you, into one category. And he said, look, the hive bees have no purpose. So it's wrong to assume that we're like them. And it is indeed, because there's been a progression. We've got simple creatures with little purpose, sophisticated creatures with more purpose. And morality, that's another debate as well. And I could also spend another 20 minutes on it. But it isn't objective. But it's unfair to call it subjective, because it's based on evolved adaptations over which we have overlain social determinations. And it's contingent. Killing is not per se wrong, only in certain conditions.
Thank you, John. You have run out of time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so with introductions out of the way, we will move on to rebuttals. So each side has 10 minutes to rebut the other side, starting with Imran again. Time will start once you get to the podium.
Okay, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Okay, John, that was a bit of a biryani, to be honest, just to give you a context of what I mean by biryani, a bit of a mix and match of everything. So I'm going to try to deal with this the best I can. First
I like
and foremost,
biryani.
Next time I see you, I'll definitely bring you some. So, look, John, one of the things you said which startled me, which was, we're not important, our opinions are not important. He mentions this in his book too. Now, if that's the case, then John, why come here today and present a case for your position, right? First and foremost. It gets better. So why come here and present a case for anti-theism in particular? Because that's how you represent yourself, that you're an anti-theist. And secondly, why write a book which is, reasonably thick and is quite a long read if your opinions don't mean anything? Honestly, because much of this book, John, much of this book is full of your opinions, right? Essentially.
Thank you for promoting it for me.
That's no problem. If you guys want to read it, go ahead. Here it is. Yeah. But so I don't get that. There's a bit of a contradiction here, John. So I would like you to clarify that specific point. If your opinions mean nothing, then why are you on this trajectory as to, you know, promoting your outlook and having debates and having discussions and making videos on YouTube, writing books, you know, coming here today, etc. That would be interesting to know from your perspective. Secondly, so one of the ways John tried to highlight that life is absurd, he began with the earth, and he tried to highlight earth is insignificant from the perspective of, although this is, I don't see how this is related to what we're discussing, but nevertheless, I'll address these points. He said the earth is insignificant because it's one planet amongst, I think, I don't know the number, was a huge number of other planets that are out there. Well, that's one way of looking at it. That's your opinion, John, as to what we're seeing here, what we're observing here. Another way of looking at it, another opinion could be, well, that's what makes Earth special. That there is so much out there that this one blue little dot, Carl Sagan on one of his covers, I don't remember what the book was called, but he called it the picture where he had the blue little dot on the cover. It was fascinating that amongst all of this vast space, there is this one planet that has life, and that too intelligent life. That, I would say, another way of looking at it, that makes Earth very significant from that perspective. And secondly, life, intelligent life. Not only any form of life, but we have intelligent life here. So you can flip that and look at it the other way too. So that's my specific opinion on that. Moving on, you mentioned something about, let me just get my notes. So you highlighted that you made a statement that, look, life is absurd, or life is absurd on atheism and naturalism, but it's more absurd with God. You didn't actually go ahead and, you know, really show us as to why that's the case. Now, obviously, I don't know if did you get a chance to read the Quran or look into Islam before coming to this debate?
Not a lot, I confess.
Okay, if you had, you probably would have, you know, changed some of the slides that you had there, because you had some generalizations that you shared there. Again, you shared some of your opinions in regards to, you know, what religious people do or have done, etc. Now, your book is full of such examples as well. You obviously predominantly attack the Christian tradition as to some of the bloodshed and you know, and the evils that have happened. But just for a second, if I move over here, just to share this with you. Now, I would agree with you. Obviously, now throughout history, religions have been, and there have been some pockets of Islam and Muslims too that have done some atrocious things, no doubt. I'm not denying this. But so have the anti-theists too. Right, those that deny God. Now, there's a very interesting book that I'd like to give you the reference of. It's called War and Peace in Islam. Definitely have a read. And what the author has done, he's sort of tallied from the year 0 to 2008 the number of death tolls which have resulted from different groups throughout history. And interestingly, Christianity is right up there, and Christianity is right up there with a figure of, let me see here. So it shares the largest with between 119.42 million and 236.66 million victims, right? Medium of 178.04. Interestingly, the second group that's up there, any guesses?
Well, probably atheists, but
yes, and the anti-theist group.
I would contest that description.
Well, you can contest it with the author of this book. I'm sure he would like to hear from you. So it has a figure of 124.41 million deaths from the year 0 to the year 2008. So look, if we're going to play a numbers game, John, as you've done in your book as well, it goes both ways, right? So it's not really an argument against religion. Now, you mentioned something about you can do whatever you like in this world and you'll get paradise up there. Well, that's not the Islamic tradition. Let me just give you some information regarding what we believe as Muslims. This life is extremely significant from the perspective of how we engage in this life. We are told to do good, live as upright human beings, serve humanity. And it's for doing the good that we do in this life that we get an eternal paradise, right? And there's a stark warning for those that don't do this. Because paradise it'll just be given to you because you do whatever you like. You have to put in the work here. So there's a very interesting philosophy there that I really recommend that you look into further for your research. You said something about, that I said the example of the hive bees, and that they didn't have any purpose. I didn't say that, you misquoted me. I was referring to Darwin, and Darwin highlighted that if we had evolved under other conditions, different conditions, our moral outlook of right and wrong, if you want to call it, that would have been as is seen by the bees, if you could say such a thing, which is we right for the mother bee to kill its fertile daughters, etc. So it'll just be a different set of morals, if you like, because of different conditions that we've evolved under. right?
different species in that
Yes,
case.
but the point is that the point that he's highlighting and the point I was highlighting that evolution renders morality subjective, is subject to change, is subject to the conditions that we develop under. It does not render morality objective in any way, shape or form, nor does it give us an understanding of what good is and bad is, what right is, what wrong is. It's not concerned with this, right? It's an unconscious process. It doesn't have an intent. It doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have a direction.
Correct.
Right? So there's problems there. That's why I highlight that. If you look at it from that perspective, you end up in the position where, again, at best, morality is subjective. Right? That's all it is. Let me see if there's anything else here. So look, another thing I wanted to engage with you, and I will probably bring this up in the discussion section. You have a very interesting outlook on what is evidence, and hence what leads to knowledge, right? Now, you sort of say that evidence is what's observable, what's repeatable, and what is shareable, right? So you seem to take a view which is that of scientism, right? A type of scientism, right? And I don't want to label you, but you can give us clarity in that specific point.
I knew that would come up, yes.
But the point is that it seems like, according to you, that science is the only way to truth, or the method of science is the only way to truth, right? Now, I want to know if that's the case, then again, why haven't you employed that throughout your book, right? Why didn't you employ that throughout your discussion today? Why didn't you stick to those? And you mentioned your specific definition, but you didn't stick to those. You gave a lot of your opinions, and a lot of opinions which I believe were incorrect, based on incorrect facts, etc. So there's a lot of inconsistency there, and I'd like to know how you sort of reconcile those two things. Anything else? How long do I have? 2 minutes. Okay, so going back to my point and just finishing off where I left off. Now, like we said, the discussion isn't about God's existence, right? This is not the discussion of today's topic. It's, is life absurd without God? And what I was highlighting is that, yes, from an atheistic, naturalistic perspective, life is indeed absurd. It doesn't make any sense. And then I didn't finish in my initial delivery, which was, I started talking about how Islam makes sense of these realities. So we looked at purpose, we looked at value, we looked at happiness, right? Now, regarding value, let me just give you another insight as well. So one specific example you can look at and research further, because what we said, that God is the one that gives value to life. There is a very interesting story in Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is the table spread, as it's translated in the English, of Cain and Abel. And you've probably heard this from the Christian tradition as well. They have a very similar story. Or, yeah, same story, but with different perspectives regarding certain things. But what's interesting there is that Cain and Abel were the two sons of Adam, and they basically, one of the brothers murdered the other out of envy, and that was the first murder that took place on this earth. And it was at that moment God instilled a law in place which stands till today and will stand till the day of judgment, which is that human life is valuable, that if you were to take one innocent life, it is as if you took the life of the whole of humanity. And if you were to save one innocent life, it is as if you have saved the whole of humanity. That's value. Right? That God has given us value from that perspective. So what I'm saying is that Islam comprehensively answers these fundamental questions that we have as human beings. Now, I'm not saying this is clear evidence or proof for Islam. Right? I don't want you to misquote me there. What I am saying, however, is that these are clear signs for the intelligent individual to pick up on. That atheism and naturalism doesn't sit well with my nature. It doesn't fit well with me. It doesn't make sense. It's against what I know as a human being. It strips me from being able to account for those things I know as a human being. And Islam, on the other hand, is in line with your nature from these perspectives, because it answers these questions, it provides the answers. And as human beings, something I want us to all consider today, as human beings, we're not logical robots, right? We don't believe things and follow things and even inquire about things based on whether they have been logically established or proved or not.
We're out of time, bro.
I'll finish that point later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Where to begin? What Imran is doing there, and he admits it really himself because he has to use both words, is he's conflating atheism with naturalism. Atheism is a lack of belief in the claims of believers. Until believers can come up with some evidence for God, then the fallback position is the same with regard to, the Loch Ness Monster. Until there's some evidence for it, we're right not to be, to be suspicious, to be non-believers. And to get around that problem, what Imran has had to do is tack on naturalism to atheism so that he can rubbish that rather than the target, which is just not believing. I've got some brilliant cartoons about this, which I should have put together to show you on the screen. But I don't call myself an atheist. And let me ask you a question. Hands up if you don't believe in fairies. Hands up. Come on, be honest. It's not scary. You can put your hand up if you don't believe in fairies. Okay? Most of us don't believe in fairies. Should we have a special word for you? Are you a-fairyists then? We don't need this word, do we? It doesn't make sense to group people together on the basis of something they lack. That's why Imran has to actually target naturalism rather than atheism. Now, he says that anti-theists have committed atrocities. And he's right. There was Stalin. He was a famous non-believer. He committed atrocities. Pol Pot, he committed atrocities. And there's some other more dubious ones, because Hitler, of course, was actually a Catholic. And I'm not sure about Mao, whether he was a Confucian or what. But the point is, yes, non-believers have committed atrocities, but they haven't done it for belief. They haven't done it for no God. They've done it for greed, for power. The same as any other person that commits atrocity. And that's true as well of the theists. Christians have done some appalling things, and Muslims too. Only recently we had a man shot in Streatham because he got out of jail and stabbed people. And the ISIS are claiming it as one of theirs. Now, I know you're all moderates, and good for you, but the point is that Islam or Christianity or any religion can be the gateway drug for fundamentalism. There are a lot of bewildered Muslim parents in Birmingham right now who are stunned that their children, their beloved children, went and fought for ISIS and got killed. Now, morality. It's changed. Thank heavens it's changed. Would we want to go back to the days of witch burning? Would we want to go back to the days of, and it still happens in some countries, noticeably theocratic Muslim countries, stoning to death female adulterers? Would we want to? Or would we prefer morality to change, to get more modern? I think the latter. Thank heavens morality has changed. We've grown up. We're not Stone Age men anymore. And I expected Imran to level the accusation of scientism at me. It's a word that scientists don't use. It's a word that theists use to denigrate science. People love to label other people that they don't like. I mean, there's lots of labels for non-members of your club. It used to be heathens. Then it became Gentiles. Then it became infidels. And now it's atheists. Don't go in for this labeling. Scientism is another label. They've stuck ism on the end in order to make it sound like an ideology. Like conservatism, liberalism, socialism. It's not. Science is not an ideology. It has no principles, no values. It is a method of discovery. It's investigation. That's what it is. How the information is used is not down to scientists. It's down to politicians. It's down to businessmen. Scientism is a negative word to level at science with a finger of blame. Don't use it. Now, Imran's right. My book is about my opinion. Of course it is. That's all we have. But I didn't say we couldn't have them. What I said was they're unimportant. My book has made not a ripple in space-time. The universe has gone on as if it never happened. That's because my opinion doesn't matter. The reason I do this, he asked me why I do this, it's because I'm against unnecessary division. All that religions do is set people against people. It wouldn't be so bad if there was only one. But unfortunately, one religion claims to be the true one, and another religion claims to be the true one, and that's a recipe for conflict. I say none of them are true until there's evidence for a God. Give me some. Give me some evidence. Not argument. It's a common mistake for people to think that argument is evidence. It isn't. So, purpose. How much longer? Oh, thank you. Purpose. I've got better speed up. Just because we want an ultimate purpose doesn't mean that there is one. That's like a child wanting something for Christmas. Humans are not special. Does a mosquito have value? Eh? Who's the judge? It's us. Do we have a conscience that we have eradicated smallpox? No. Because it's humans first. Disease well down the list. Value is a matter of judgment. It's not falling on us from the sky. We have the power. Imran sounded as though he was elevating humans to the level of judges. That's something of a claim. So, yes. He claimed that morals, this is where he conflated the whole of life into one category. Hive bees and sharks, and none of us have any objective. Well, look at it's a progression. Simple animals have simple purposes. Plants, what purpose do they have? Just to survive. So, saying that evolution is a bogeyman is entirely wrong, because we're at the top end, you know. We are the most highly evolved, and I shouldn't really use that term, because it implies that there is a direction, which there isn't. Thank you.
Okay, so this section will be a discussion, a bit of back and forth between our two speakers. I will be moderating to try and keep things on topic. So forgive me for any mistakes I make. Hopefully I don't make any. This is a 15-minute section. Reminder that after the closing remarks after this, there will be Q&A, so please do send your Q&A questions to that Slido. So without further ado, whichever one of you wants to, to begin with.
Yeah. So, hello, John.
Yes, hello.
Hi there. I think before we start this discussion session, it's very important to determine something. Do you believe your opinions matter or don't they matter?
They matter to me.
Okay, so
But they don't matter to the universe.
No, because if you don't believe your own opinions matter, then I'm not going to take them seriously. There's no point. This discussion becomes absurd from that perspective, then, right? So if you believe your opinions matter, then obviously they will matter to us as well. So because we're having trying to have a discussion today regarding a very important topic. So you do acknowledge your opinions matter, right?
Well, in the confines of this room, certainly, yes.
So if we had this discussion outside this room, would your opinions matter or not? I mean, it's a very simple question. I mean, you wouldn't be here today expressing your views if you didn't believe your opinions mattered.
Well, I was going to save my response to your challenge that why do I do this? Why am I here debating for my closing remarks? But okay, I can take your question now. I do it because I want a secular world.
You want a secular world?
I want a world in which religious opinions do not control political or educational matters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So look, you just said you want a secular world where religious opinions do not have
influence.
Exactly. Yes. So, but to do that, wouldn't you say if we were going to do this in a academic way at least, wouldn't you say you would have to first understand and study all religions or look into them at least, which you obviously haven't done when it comes to Islam today, right? So why have the outlook already that that's what you want when you don't even know what Islam has to say regarding life, regarding man life in the universe, regarding other fundamental things that are relevant to us as human beings?
Well, that's a good question. It's because without evidence for a God, it doesn't really matter what any of the scriptures of any religion do say. So you might as well say that my Loch Ness monster is pink and likes Nutella.
Okay, so let's try to unravel this a bit. So now, and I think it's important to highlight this, John. You seem to have an underlying premise, which is evidence is what comes from observation.
Yes.
And something that you can observe and study that way, right?
Yes.
So in other words, I wasn't calling you someone who ascribed to scientism. If you, and I'm sure everyone will acknowledge this, I asked you, do you ascribe to something similar to scientism? I don't want to label you, that's what I said, right? It's just to correct you on that.
Right.
But the point being, do you acknowledge, or is your view, or your outlook, that science is the only way to truth?
Yes.
Okay, good. So do you not see the issues with that outlook, or the problems with that outlook?
Well, you can try explaining it to me.
So let me give you an example. Have you been to India? Have you been to India?
No, I haven't.
You haven't been to India?
I'd love to.
Okay, do you believe India exists?
Yes.
Okay, so you haven't been there, you haven't observed it, yet you believe it exists.
The evidence is fairly convincing.
Okay, so what do you mean by the evidence is fairly convincing?
I've seen photographs taken from space.
Brilliant, okay. What else?
Do we need more?
Okay, fine, fair enough. I was just giving you the benefit of the doubt that you can give us a bit more so I can work.
I know of people who have come from India, who have visited India.
Okay,
a friend of mine is there now.
Okay.
And I'm on Messenger and Facebook with him. He's currently, where is he currently? Is it Calcutta? No, I can't remember.
So look, here's the problem, John. You haven't observed India yourself, yet you believe it exists based on photographs and people that have been there. Now, how do you know those photographs are actually of India, and that you're not just being told they're of India?
Well, I think that you'd have to. I mean, you're on a loser there because you're having to try to rubbish all of the photographs taken from space by all of the spacecraft, all of them orbiting satellites, and all of the spacemen that have been in
Have
the
you
IS.
seen? Okay, have you seen yourself satellites that are up there right now?
Yes, you can observe satellites.
But have you observed them yourself through a telescope?
I have, yes.
You have? Okay. So here's the thing. What I'm saying regarding India is you haven't observed it yourself. So what I'm saying essentially is your belief India exists is based on something called testimony, right? In philosophy, this is known as authentic and valid testimony, right? Which is, by the way, John, an integral part of the scientific method, right?
Well, yes.
Something
but,
you deny in your book itself.
But the testament can itself be tested. I mean, with the right equipment, I can go and investigate India
That's a
for
potential.
myself.
That's a potential, John. But right
Yes,
now you haven't
yes.
done that, yet you believe India exists, right? So your belief is not based upon what you can do as far as observing it. It's based on something else. So what I'm trying to highlight to you, John, is that are you willing to acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge other than just science, which you're demonstrating right now? By highlighting that you believe India exists, although you haven't observed it yourself. Pictures are testimonials. Someone is telling you those pictures are of India. You're going by the testimony of people. Let me give you another example which may be closer to home, which may help you a bit better, if you don't mind. Right? Do you believe evolution, the Darwinian mechanism, is true?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't listen. As an ex-science teacher, I don't use terms like "I believe." I use terms like "the evidence shows." The evidence
Shows that.
that evolution is a fact.
So you believe the Darwinian mechanism in particular?
Well, now, are you going to pin me down to a man who died 150 years ago, or are you going to allow me to update
Fair
evolution
enough.
with what we've discovered since?
Give us your definition then. What do you want to call it? Evolution? Just evolution in general?
Well, at its basic level, all evolution means is change. And we can observe change happening today, and we can see evidence of a progression of things that happened in the past, in the fossil record and so on. And so the best explanation is that change happened in the past too.
Okay, good. So look, that's good you're saying that. So what I'm asking you specifically is, do you believe the theory of evolution is true?
Yes.
Okay, so in you saying yes, have you done all of the observations which led to that conclusion of that particular theory?
This is the "were you there" argument.
Well, that's coming from your own perspective, because you said evidence is something which is observable, it's something that's repeatable and something that's shareable.
Yes.
Anything, and you've said also in your book and your videos that anything that comes from the human mind can't be trusted because it's tainted.
Yes.
Your words.
Yes, that's right.
So the theory that you believe in is coming from the mind of a scientist.
No. The theory that I subscribe to is that change can be observed, and potentially I can go and observe change. I can go. Have you seen the big Petri dish experiment?
No, I haven't.
A fantastic experiment. They made a Petri. You know what a Petri dish is? Yeah. It's a culture container which you put a nutrient jelly in, and then you can grow bacteria. Okay. They made a great big one, it's a meter long, and they've put two different bacteria. No, they put same culture of bacteria in each end, and in between them they've put increasing strengths of antibiotic. Okay, 10%, 20%, 100%, and initially the bacteria spread in the area where there's no antibiotic. There's a video of this because it's speeded up. We use organisms that have a short lifetime because we can't observe massive changes. We don't live long enough. Okay, so bacteria are perfect. They reproduce every 20 minutes. Okay, so initially they stay confined in the area where there's no antibiotic, but a few of them mutate and they can break out and pass into the area where the antibiotic is 10%. Okay, more time goes by, and an even smaller number mutate, and they pass into the 20%, so on and so forth. You get the picture. Eventually, they can colonize the 100% strength.
That's an observation.
Change being observed repeatedly and shareably.
Yes.
You can watch it.
Fair enough. I agree.
Today.
So let's make a distinction here. There is a difference between observations of science and theories of science, right?
Yes.
So what I'm trying to highlight to you is that there are other routes to knowledge which are involved even within the scientific method itself, which you have to rely upon for you to believe the conclusions of science.
Well,
which you reject, by the way. So I want to know, which way is it? Do you acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge, such as testimonial knowledge, or do you hold firm to that science is the only way to truth?
Where you are trying to put words into my mouth here.
I'm asking you the question.
Okay. Is trying to make me... You see, the trouble is that the word belief has two meanings. It can mean merely accepting something which we know to be true. Like, you know, if I jump off a roof, I'll very probably fall. Nobody would contest that. So, to all intents and purposes, it does not need actively believing. We can observe believing now in what do they call them? Give me a word to the
I'm lost. I'm really lost, right?
Big machine, you put a person in and you watch his brain. And you give him radioactive material. Thank you? Yeah?
MRI.
Yeah, medicals, come on, tell me the name. That's it, thank you, MRI. I've been in one, MRI scanner. And the functional MRI scanner is the one where you can put in a decaying substance into the, radioactively decaying, harmless, into the bloodstream, and watch where it congregates. So if you give somebody in an MRI scanner pictures of things that need believing and pictures of things which are known, you can see how actively thinking he is. And things that need believing attract a lot of this activity. Things like, my horse will win the race. You need to actively believe that. But things like, yesterday this horse won the race, that's a foregone conclusion. We know that is now a fact. You don't need to believe that.
Yeah, but John,
So-
I'm sure
so
everyone's
I'm
really,
trying to explain-
everyone's really interested in the science lessons. I'm sure we've got a lot to learn from you, being an
I'm trying to
ex-physics
explain,
teacher.
because you asked me about where I need to use belief in science.
No, I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you acknowledge that there are other routes to knowledge which are integral to the scientific method itself, such as testimony? Or don't you acknowledge that? Are you just saying, just purely, because according to your book, and you may want to change your opinion, that observations, repeatable, and that are shareable, full stop. According to that type of definition, you're pigeonholing yourself in many ways. Because you, in a way, you're denying the scientific enterprise. You're denying science in itself.
No.
Right?
Because...
So just tell me this, John. John, do you believe in the theories of science?
The theories of science do not need believing.
I'm not saying the absolute, I'm just asking, so do you ascribe...
No, I wouldn't claim they were absolute. I claim that they are the best explanation currently.
And do you acknowledge that they are also what's incorporated in the process of getting to the theory? There are other elements to it, such as testimony, reasoning, argumentation.
Can we let John make his point?
Yes.
Every theory makes predictions,
Yeah.
and at that stage you can believe the prediction or not. We would call it a hypothesis. And there will be rival hypotheses, just like there are rival runners in a horse race, and you can choose your favorite. Okay? And that is where belief is applied in science.
So you'd acknowledge that?
At the frontiers where we don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you in a simple way. We've got 1 minute about 2 minutes left. Do you acknowledge testimony as a valid route to knowledge? It's a simple question.
I acknowledge testimony which can be tested. I acknowledge, if you were to tell me that I can see a particular satellite going past at this moment, then I know that if I get the right equipment, I can check out your testimony.
Sure, but that's a potential, John.
Yes, I can check out your testimony. Otherwise, your testimony is very suspect.
Yeah, but I don't think you're understanding my point right now.
Because I could testify to you that I have fairies at the bottom of my garden. And unless you go there and check for yourself, you should doubt me.
Sure, but I'm not, look, we're getting into the epistemology of things. I'm asking you a very simple question. Do you consider testimony as a fundamental route to knowledge, something that science is also dependent upon?
Only if it can be checked.
But that doesn't look, testimony. You don't take testimony as a route to knowledge based on the fact that it could be tested. That's
Yes.
So because
the whole point of science is to challenge claims.
Yeah. So,
Testimony is a claim.
Okay.
So it must be challengeable
Okay, so
in order to be scientific.
Okay, so let me ask you this way. Do you acknowledge that in science, let me keep making this as simple as possible. When you're engaged in science, a scientist is doing the science. They take observations. Bertrand Russell, for example, highlighted that you, as a scientist, you take observations and you reason upon the observations.
That is time. I'm afraid.
We need more time, man. Bismillah. Okay, so I hope there was more time so we could continue this discussion because there was a lot to discuss there. However, just to conclude, I'm going to go back to my original points, which were, whichever way you look at it, whether you call yourself an atheist, a naturalist, a non-believer, and not associate with the labels, the point is that as soon as you say that there is no God, that there is no creator, and hence, therefore, what you're acknowledging is that everything is a result of just random physical processes and happenings, that strips you from making sense of any of these fundamental realities that we know to be true, such as purpose, meaning, value. These mean nothing. It lands you in what you would call, you can see it this way, in the type of existential nihilism, which is completely just averse to our nature as human beings. It doesn't provide any answers. It doesn't give us any insights. It just reduces us down to molecules and atoms, and that's it. Now, if you're comfortable living like that and you're okay with that, then that's fine. That's your prerogative. But if you're someone that's inquiring and wants to know and recognizes that there must be answers, the fact that there's an itch inside me to find answers. And what's really interesting, just as a side point, is that the fact that we can ask such questions, right, about purpose and meaning and value, and the fact that we're so concerned about these questions, so much so that when we don't find answers to these questions, in many cases it leads to anxiety and types of depression. And in turn, it pushes us away from the whole idea of surviving and passing on our genes, because that's the last thing we're concerned about when we're anxious and depressed, right? That in and of itself should be a sign that you can't reduce the human being down to just atoms and molecules and matter, right? There are other elements to us as human beings, which you cannot account for on atheism or naturalism, right? I haven't seen Richard at any point in today's discussion so grapple with these ideas and try to provide a response where he seems to have conceded and said, yep, there is no purpose, life is absurd, and that's it. So I'm happy that he conceded that, so at least, you got an acknowledgement from someone on the other side who is an unbeliever, who is telling you that life is absurd without God. So if you find yourself in this position, what I'll encourage you to do is look into Islam. And the reason I wasn't able to conclude in my previous address, which was the fact that Islam makes sense and it fits human nature and it provides answers, that should be reason enough for us to at least look into Islam and see what it has to say about human beings, human life, our existence, and where we're going, right? We need to not be reductionists in our approach and reduce everything down to empiricism, what's observable, because there's much more to life than that, right? Science is amoral. Science does not give you good or bad, right or wrong. And this is the problem I have with John's position, which is that he wants to reduce everything down to science. Science is the only way to truth. Anything beyond this, well, you can't believe in it, you can't acknowledge it, and that's problematic, right? That is highly problematic, and as human beings, I would even say most atheists would disagree with John's outlook in regards to the roots of knowledge, etc. So, to conclude, I thank you guys for coming out today. I thank you guys for participating, which you're gonna now. We're gonna participate with your Q&A, but I thank you guys for being patient with us and hearing us out today. And I would really recommend you guys to do two things. One, if you haven't already and you're someone seeking and searching, to look into Islam, because the message of Islam is very simple and very beautiful. That there is a creator. There is one all-powerful creator who created us and humanity and everything else that exists, and he created us for no other reason except to know him and to worship him. And this type of worship, when you submit to your creator and you worship him alone, this frees you from all types of slavery. Because the false notion we have as human beings is that we are free. or we want to be free, but as soon as you're born in this reality, no one is free. Everyone is submitting to something or the other. Everyone is a slave of something or the other. There's something we want to know and love and obey the most. That is the thing we're submitting to. It could be in the form of money, materialism, power, whatever else it may be. But Islam gives you the option, and the most intelligent option, which is choose your slavery. Who do you want to be a slave to? Who do you want to submit to? Created things? Material things? People? Ideologies? Yourself? Or do you want to be a slave to the creator of the heavens and the earth, the one that created everything? And in doing so, this elevates the human being and frees him from these ephemeral shackles. Right? And I conclude on a very beautiful line of poetry by Iqbal, a famous poet from the East. And he said something very profound. He said, this one prostration that you find so difficult and so heavy on you, to prostrate your head on the ground to the creator of the heavens and the earth, this will free you from 1,000 prostrations. And it's something for us to really think about. Thank you guys for listening.
Yes, well, I'd like to pick up on where we left off in the free discussion bit, because Imran was trying to pin me down to accepting testimony. And that is a very dodgy route to go down. The point is that science is testable. And you don't have to believe what you're told. I advise you, don't believe what you're told. That's gullibility. That is the route to buying, what's her name, Goop? Yeah, her. Yeah, go and buy her stuff if you want to take testimony, you know? But check. Go and investigate for yourself. Be skeptical. This is the way. If you're gullible, you know, I've got a lovely London bridge you'd like to buy. But the thing about religions, and I'm not singling out Islam here, is they are not testable. They make no predictions that we can investigate and find confirmatory evidence. In fact, attempts have been made. Attempts have been made to verify the effectiveness of prayer. There was, who is it? I can never remember the name of the organisation. It's a Christian organisation, spent millions of pounds on testing prayer by... Thank you. Yes, I'm glad you came. They spent millions of pounds testing people who were recovering from heart operations in hospitals. Some of them were prayed for. There was a control group that wasn't prayed for, and some of them were prayed for but didn't know it. And the outcome was very embarrassing to the organisation that had funded this experiment, because it showed that if you knew you were being prayed for, your chances of recovery got worse. So my advice is, if you want to pray for somebody, don't tell them. Now, the thing about these religions that are untestable, I know we've gone past the to and fro, but the question I would have liked to have asked Imran was, why the Quran? Why Islam? There's 2 billion people who claim to be Christians. Why not join them? I'll tell you why. Most of us inherit our religions. We join the religion of our parents or our grandparents. We join the religion of our society, of our school. Religions are geographical. They spread out from an origin like a disease. And if nothing else, that should indicate to us the human fabrication of them. Now, I was misquoted a bit. I don't say that there is no God. I say that there is no evidence for any God. I'm open. If you've got some, please come and tell me. I'm quite finicky, though. I'm not going to accept your story of a revelation that you had. How do we know it wasn't a dream? But the final point, I've still got a lot of time. The final point I was going to make is that these religions that, most of them, the major ones that are surviving today, about 3,900 of them have died out. There's lots of religions, they were mostly animism type of religions, where a god is supposedly living in a creature, a tree, or maybe a volcano. They've all died out. Well, almost died out. There's still some surviving in remote parts of the world. But the surviving religions are no good recommendation for joining them. They're at each other's throats. They are insisting that they are the possessors of the truth. I've got a great cartoon of this. It's a graveyard of gods. You know, there's lots of headstones with different gods' names on them. And then there's a man with his little son pointing to a ghostly image above the graveyard, and he's saying, "That's my God. She's the real one." But until there's evidence, what reality is there? I was asked about the supernatural realm. Well, there's no evidence for a supernatural realm. Not only that, but we have no idea of how to look for a supernatural realm, because all of our equipment, all of our detectors are based on naturalism. And if we do somehow invent a detector that can detect something unnatural, I don't like the word supernatural, it's unnatural, then if we detected it, it would immediately be natural. It would have materialized like a ghost. So that is my position. And I think it's unassailable. It's up to you. I challenge you to provide me with evidence. I'll look at it. I'm skeptical. I'm not gullible. If you can convince me, maybe I'll join you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin Q&A now. So the first question for both of you, if we were just created through random physical particles, something with no rationality, how have we become rational beings? How can something be derived from something that doesn't have it to begin with?
That's a good question. Shall I take that first, Imran?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in case I might forget to do this later on, thank you for coming. And thank you for listening to me so politely. Now, Imran mentioned if we're just atoms and molecules, then this is a reductionist view and we can't derive morality from it. Well, he's the one being reductionist. What he's doing there is completely negating emergence theory. Do you know what emergence theory is? Let me explain. One molecule of water, H2O, cannot be wet because the quality that we call the property of wetness involves a film of molecules linked together, covering a surface, evaporating and taking heat away. That is the phenomenon that we give the name wetness. One molecule of water can't do it. It has to be not just a chain, but a web of molecules stuck together. Wetness is a property that emerges from a collection of molecules. Now, if wetness can emerge from a collection of molecules, just imagine what can happen when you take a simple bacterium of 4.5 billion years ago and give it 4.5 billion years of evolution to end up with some mammalian creatures like us. all sorts of properties can emerge, and they have. And one of them is this morality. Rationality. Yeah, morality is another one, isn't it? Is this rationality? Who would think that silicon chips, which are made of sand with a few little bits and pieces of boron and phosphorus inoculated into them, who would think that they could calculate? Who would think that they could film? Who would think that they can play iPod music? Properties emerge from complexity. Rationality, morality has emerged into us. And we're not the only creatures that have it. Anybody who has a dog knows that they've got some rationality, they've got some morality. Anybody who's seen films of a mother dog raising kittens when, the mother cat has lost its life and the mother dog has lost her puppies, you can plug the kittens in. This is the result of billions of years of increased complexity and sophistication. We have reached a stage where our imperative is not just to survive in a brutal world. Our imperative is to nurture and foster and raise the next generation. And I've probably gone off the subject of rationalism a bit there, but I'll hand over to Imran.
Okay, listen. So it's a very interesting question, and intuitively when we think of this question from the perspective of atheism and naturalism and reducing things down to atoms and molecules, it doesn't really add up. But what's very interesting is that if you look at it from the perspective of evolution and the fact that we've evolved, now evolution is not, this whole process is not concerned with truth. It's concerned with survival value. And this is a very interesting discussion that's happening amongst the experts, that it's not about truth value. For example, some of the examples, Anthony O'Hare, I believe, is one of the individuals. He wrote a book called Beyond Evolution, Oxford Press, if I'm not mistaken. He highlights that true beliefs as well as false beliefs can both adequately result in survival in different circumstances, highlighting that there is no need for truth-bearing rational faculties to emerge from this evolutionary process. So that's quite interesting. So there's a lot of research. In Hamza's book, The Divine Reality, he has a chapter on this, on rationality. It's a very interesting chapter, and he's sharing a lot of the current research that's coming out regarding this particular topic. And what he's highlighting that purely from an evolutionary naturalistic perspective, the best you can do is you have to remain skeptical. Because there is no explanation, no way of explaining how truth-bearing rational faculties have emerged in human beings when both true beliefs as well as false beliefs can adequately result in survival. So definitely check that out. So it is a problem at the moment currently, and it is something it's neither here nor there from a naturalistic perspective. So at best, they have to remain skeptical. And if they have to remain skeptical, well, then that presents other problems too, other philosophical problems, which is, well, if you can't account for your truth-bearing rational faculties, where does that leave you now? All of the claims that you make, the truth claims that you make, all of these methods we adopt, and for example, the scientific method. By the way, I don't have a problem with the scientific method when I'm sort of expressing it in this way. I think it's a phenomenal method, but I also acknowledge, as Muslims, you acknowledge that it has a remit. It deals with the material, physical world, and that's the scope.
It makes the assumption.
It hasn't got a foot in the door when it comes to other metaphysical realities, but it's a different point.
What do you propose as an alternative source of information then? Palmistry?
I tried to discuss that with you, but obviously you didn't want to acknowledge testimony.
Well, you seem to have gone back to the discussion mode now.
Question, please.
So the point being, it lands you in a very sticky wicket if you're a naturalist and you ascribe to this evolutionary outlook on life, because you have to remain skeptical, and therefore all of the truth claims you make, all of the things we ascribe to that we believe are true, and the methods we use to inquire about reality and understand the truth, all of this, you can't account for any of this anymore. So it's highly problematic from that perspective too. But yeah, that's what I mentioned that, inshallah.
Right, I should have clarified. I'm trying to limit to 3 minutes each for responses to questions so that we can get through questions easily. Right, so the next most popular question, which is now the most popular question. If the extremist Muslims are committing acts of atrocities for the hope of reward in the afterlife, then in the model of single existence, then what is the reason why it is morally incorrect to steal, kill, rape, etc.? The English language is a bit limited here, but I think you get the idea. So 3 minutes each. Yeah. So if the extremist Muslims are committing acts of atrocities for the hope of reward in the afterlife, then in the model of this single existence, then what is the reason why it is morally incorrect? What is the reason why it is morally incorrect to steal, kill, rape, etc.?
I think it's then in this representation of existence.
Yes.
Is that the meaning?
I believe so.
I have no idea.
So,
I can read
okay,
101 ways, man, to be honest.
that's probably one for me again. I expected to get most of the questions with this audience. Why is it morally incorrect to steal, kill, rape, etc.? I can tell you that. It's because it's detrimental to survival. If you kill or rape somebody or steal some things, somebody's going to come after you. There will be deaths. And our imperative is to succeed. We are here to breed. We are here to grow more and more humans and to conquer more and more environments. If there's a purpose, that's it. And doing nasty things to each other is detrimental because you get retribution. Somebody comes after you. So don't do it.
Okay. We just set a timer. Yep.
So I guess one of the things we could take from Richard's answer is, well, there's nothing objectively right or wrong about it. From a moral perspective, it's just linked to survival. And that's, again, a very bleak way of looking at things. But there's many issues here. Now, I know, John, in certain online on videos, and I think in your book too, you sort of put forward this premise, this idea that good is whatever results in the flourishing of the community and society, correct? Mm-hmm. So, and bad is the opposite, or evil is the opposite, which is that whatever leads to suffering and harm. This is very similar to Sam Harris's moral landscape. And the problem here is...
I like to be bracketed with him.
Okay, either way, there's an issue. And the issue here is that you are making a claim here that good is X. Good is what leads to the flourishing of humanity. Where did you get this idea from? How do you know that's good? You're starting with this axiom which according to your own standards, there's no way of validating, which is another problem, right? So this whole idea, and on top of it, as soon as you say good is that which results in human flourishing and the benefit of society, this in and of itself is a type of a moral claim. Well, right? Sorry, it's Q&A. I'm just finished.
Okay. You're trying to limit the back and forth.
So the issue is it's a moral claim in and of itself when you say good is what results in the flourishing of humanity. So here's the problem. This is circular now because you're adopting a moral outlook to make that claim, and then you're making that claim and presenting that paradigm to now suggest a way to understand what good and bad is. This is you can't, again, there are many logical issues here with what's going on here. So at the end of the day, like I've said, if you are just a rearrangement of atoms and molecules, there is no objective morality. It's all subjective, and hence, in the grand scheme of things, there is nothing that would technically prevent you from that outlook, and if you logically follow through from doing certain atrocities, there's nothing there to prevent you. There is no moral factors there to stop you from doing that.
Boss, can I come back on that?
Can he come back on that? Yeah. Okay. Briefly, you can come back.
Thank you. Well, I didn't say that our imperative to survive and to expand our population and to conquer more habitats was good. I said it was success. So, good or bad is a judgment. It's a call that you can make. I mean, for example, it's arguable that it would have been good to have killed Hitler at some stage in his lifetime. But supposing your daughter was being held at gunpoint, I don't know whether you've got a daughter, but hypothetically, would it be good for you to kill the gunman before he pulled the trigger? I think it would. So there is no objective good or bad. What there is contingency.
I'd like to move on to the next question, just so we can get through more of them. The current top question. I have enough mercy in me that if I had the power, I would save a child from death. If God is all merciful and the most merciful, how can he not do the same? If he doesn't, he is not the most merciful. I'm assuming that's for you.
This is Epicurean.
Yeah, the issue is you're taking the Christian paradigm and applying it to Islam. To our theology and our outlook and our philosophy is totally different. We believe God is the most merciful and the most compassionate, but we also recognize God has many names and attributes. So he's also the wise. Hence, there is wisdom behind things that happens in existence. And this refers to the problem of evil, and that's what the underlying drive seems to be for this question. Now, the problem of evil is not a problem in Islam, because the fact that we understand, for example, that God is the most wise means that there's wisdom behind things that happens. Some of the atrocities, some of the difficulties, the trials, the tribulations that unfold in reality, there is wisdom behind this. Now, if you say, I can't see the wisdom, therefore there is no wisdom there, this is arguing from egocentrism, this egotistical position. Because as human beings, we don't see everything and understand everything. But then to assume that there is no wisdom there, that's the ego at play. So we understand that God has many names and attributes and they all reconcile together. So yes, he is the most merciful and the most compassionate, but he's also the wise, he's also the judge, etc. So, and it's a long discussion, but maybe whoever asked the question, I can address it with you privately, inshallah, at the end.
And my Loch Ness monster is pink. These are claims. There's no evidence for them. And Epicurus, I think, was the first recorded person to come up with this dilemma. If God doesn't intervene to save lives, he's either not there, or he's callous and uncaring, or he's powerless and not omnipotent. Which is it? I see no evidence of God saving the sufferers from this recent earthquake that we had in eastern Turkey. Eastern Turkey. I see no evidence of it.
Can I just come back to that?
Since he got to come back, yes, you do get to come back.
Thank you. So John's basically not listening to me, and he's demonstrating exactly what I said. And that is that just because you don't see the wisdom of what's happening, a specific event or occurrence yourself, it doesn't mean there's no wisdom there. Islamic theology teaches us that God has many names and attributes. He is not just the loving or just merciful. He is also the wise. And I gave you the example of the attribute of wisdom to highlight there is wisdom behind things that happen.
I heard you make your claims.
Yeah, so if that was the case, you should have maybe thought
They're
through.
just claims.
I will note, your microphone is on. When you said claim after everything you said, that is on. People can hear you. If we can please keep it respectful, if you will.
Sure.
Okay, the current top question. Nice and simple for both of you. Can science and religion not coexist?
No, they can't. And the reason is they make diametrically opposed claims. Science investigates, gathers evidence, and makes models to help us to understand the natural realm. Religion, whatever flavor of religion it is, makes claims based on no evidence that they are dogmatically correct. We, as scientists, admit we don't know how the origin of the universe came about, if indeed it did. That's a bit dubious now. We don't know how life originated, whether it came from outside or whether it arrived here or whether it began at the thermic vents under the deep sea. We don't know. And we're honest and honorable. We admit that. Religious people make claims that they do know about the origin. There's a creator who made things. He made them from nothing. I'm made of dust. But according to the Christian tradition, women are not. They're made from the ribs of a man. Apparently the dust ran out. Come on.
Well, John seems to really be taking his opinion seriously right now with all the emphasis behind what he's saying. But look, from the Islamic, again, I really believe, and I say this with respect, John, I think it's the ignorance of the philosophy of science and the ignorance of the Islamic tradition which is leading you to some of the conclusions you're making right now. History is testament to this. The Quran is testament to this, the source text of the Muslims. Throughout the Quran, God encourages to engage with the material physical world. God continuously tells us, do they not see? Do they not reflect? Have they not seen the camels and how they were created? Do they not look at the sun, the moon, the stars? God is encouraging us to do observations, to study the world. God is encouraging us to do this. And this was something that the scientists in Islamic Spain, for example, understood. Hence, it led to all of the developments in the scientific the scientific developments at the time, at that particular time in history that we see today and that we're benefiting from today, is because the Muslims at the time, the Muslim scientists at the time understood that the Quran, God in the Quran is encouraging us to engage with studying the world. And why? Now there's a very beautiful answer to this as well. Well, because God created us, He made us rational, intelligent human beings. He gave us senses. He gave us the ability to observe. He gave us the ability to see and to, study the things around us and then to reason upon them and then to come to the conclusion that, and especially when we reflect over these things, we will see His signs in creation, and which should lead the intelligent human being to the existence of God. Right? And this is something that's somewhat acknowledged by the science today as well, which is that there is fine-tuning within the universe. There are certain constants and quantities within the material physical universe which appear in a way that they seem to be designed. Richard Dawkins himself acknowledges this, right? So that may be interesting to you because you incline towards the science. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that yes, that Islam and science, at least Islam and science, can go hand in hand. They have throughout history, and we've seen some amazing developments because of this. There is no disparity. There's a beautiful verse, and I'll end on this point in the Quran, where God says, He brought us out of our mother's wombs, not knowing anything. And then He gave us hearing and sight, referring to the senses. He gave us our senses, and He gave us minds, intellects, af'idata in Arabic, which basically means not only hearts, but it's the mind. It's the activity of the mind. And He gave us these things so that we could be grateful. So the fact that, I would even say, the fact that we can engage in the scientific method, to study the world, and we can reason upon it, and we can understand it, is a great blessing from God. Right? And the underlying, things, the assumptions of science, because what do you need to do science? Let's be honest here. You need a rational, intelligent mind that can understand the world, and you need a world which is intelligible, which is uniform, meaning it could be studied. You could do repeatable observations on it. You need a universe which has uniformity. Right? How do you even make sense of a uniform universe in the absence of God anyway? There are huge problems. So the fact that we can engage in studying the world is a sign in and of itself that there is a creator. But that's besides the point. So to conclude, yes, Islam and science can go hand in hand, and there's no problem there at all.
Right. This question is specifically for Imran. We have one life which we perceive and understand. The idea of calling it absurd implies that there is another life which we compare it to and say, look at this, and say, look, this is how life is meant to. However, we cannot do this, and so surely have no idea what an absurd/non-absurd life is.
Yeah, I don't think that point's quite coherent, because what I'm trying to highlight is that there are certain things as human beings, just from our very nature, we recognize to be true, that we hold on to, that we hold sacred. And what I simply was trying to do is highlight that on atheism or naturalism, you cannot provide an account for these things, which renders life absurd from that perspective. I mean, if atheism and naturalism leads you to a type of existential nihilism and meaninglessness from the perspective of our existence, then of course that's absurd. Because every part of our being recognizes that we have meaning, we have value, human life has value, that there are morals, that it is wrong to do certain things. Right? If I was to ask John right now, is it wrong to kill an innocent child for no reason? He would say absolutely. But can he now justify his position on atheism or naturalism? Absolutely not. Because it's all subjective. It means nothing. Right? And that's the problem. That's an absurdity. If we can't appreciate that that's an absurdity, then there's something not right there from that perspective.
Right. So the next question is, if the purpose of Muslims is to worship God, why do Muslims do other things as well, other than only worship God? Because it is in the Quran it specifically says, except to worship me. Once again, please send these answers in sentences with words.
Yeah, so God says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that He did not create us for any other reason except to worship Him. But we have to understand what worship means from the Islamic perspective. Worship, if you study Islamic philosophy and theology, you realize that worship is comprehensive, meaning that everything we do in our day-to-day lives is or can be a form of worship if done for the right reasons. Even getting out of bed and brushing your teeth in the morning can be a form of worship if done with the right intention. Right, so that's how comprehensive the Islamic worldview is. And I can appreciate the confusion there, because when we think of worshipping God, the general idea that comes to mind is praying, supplicating, praying 5 times a day. These are ritualistic acts of worship. But these are also in line with all of the other acts of worship. So in other words, and this is the beautiful thing about the Islamic tradition, or the Islamic spiritual tradition, is that your whole existence becomes a means or an act of worship in and of itself. And that's a very profound thing. Everything you do, every good you do, every bad you or evil you avoid is a form of worship. Right? So it's very comprehensive from that perspective. Hopefully that answers that question. Sure.
Right, so we have 10 minutes left, so let's try and get through these last 2 questions. This one can be answered by both of you. Does it not require less faith to believe the earth was created rather than it just appeared? As there are 24 times 10 to the power of 24 planets, and only one can sustain life. Is it easier to believe that if you flipped a coin 10 quintillion times and landed heads every time, or that you landed heads half of the times? Make of that what you will.
Well, that question starts with a false proposition. It doesn't require faith to believe, well, it does require faith to believe that the earth was created, but it doesn't require faith to believe that it just appeared, because it didn't just appear. We know how it appeared, and we have, whoa, I'm falling to bits here, and we have evidence to show that gravity caused the accretion of particles, and that the same gravity caused them to form orbits around larger particles. We can explain, it didn't just appear. We can explain the process of formation of stars and planets and moons. Go and study a book on science and find out that that is completely wrong. And as for the statistical thing, well, of course, it doesn't apply. The number of heads and tails will balance out over a great number like that. They won't end up lopsided. That's very unreasonable to expect. Yes?
Sorry, so the question is, right, so we're assuming that the earth just appeared, and we're not taking into account the fact that gravity and things like that, because then that starts the question, where did gravity come from? But we're just assuming that there is no creator. That's what the question is assuming. So we're saying that
right.
There's no creator. Is it not easier to believe that the world, so we're saying, is it not easy to believe that the world was created? Because if there was no creator, how come we have all these planets and all these parameters, and yet the earth just appears?
Right, well, thank you for the clarification. I don't say that there is no creator. I say there is no evidence for a creator. And looking at what there is and calling it creation, and therefore assuming by some process that it's your God that did it, and not, I can't remember the name. There's an African god whose name I usually roll off now. But he has a creation story too. And that one he's forgotten now. Nobody follows him. So the point I'm trying to make is that... no, I've lost the thread of it now. What were you saying? It's...
Okay, so if I flip the coin...
Yeah.
Is it not easy to believe that in terms of probability, does it not require less faith?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, this is not, we're not talking about, this is a false comparison. We're not talking about probability here. We're talking about evidence of a process, which we have studied, and we've got, convincing evidence that explains how it went on. And it wasn't a statistical random event. But what you're trying to make here is a non sequitur fallacy. Okay.
Thank you. Do you want a response on that one?
Yes,
It wasn't directed
Yep.
specifically to anyone.
Yeah, so obviously it's not cute, so I can't interrogate John anymore. But I would like to know what is he, but is he uncertain about God's existence? Because he seems to play the card both ways. Sometimes he will call himself an anti-theist, sometimes an atheist, and sometimes just, that I'm not saying God doesn't exist. What do you mean by that? I mean, I'd like to know that, obviously, maybe for another debate, but just touching upon this, sorry?
Definitely, another debate.
Yeah, definitely. But just touching upon this, hopefully,
Come again
inshallah.
next week.
Inshallah. The point on this, I think there's a broader point that's being made here, and I think we should just zoom out a little bit more and go to the origins of the universe itself, right? Which is, we have this entire universe with all of its complexity, all of the laws which you would appreciate, the laws of physics, mathematics, logic, etc. I mean, he had a problem earlier. I think he mentioned something about God creating from nothing. Well, saying the universe emerged from nothing, or if that was the claim, one of the claims that's made, is more absurd. That's what you call magic, right? When we say God created, let me clarify. When we say God created from nothing or via nothing, what we're saying essentially is God can do this because He is the being who created with His will and His power. So it's not it's God's will and power that the universe came into being via. So God, via His will and power, created everything that exists. Now the atheists denying God put themselves in a position, if they are to take the line of reasoning, well, the universe came from nothing, well, then you're saying the universe literally came from nothing, and then you end up with some absurd ideas, such as individuals like Lawrence Krauss, when they come out and write books on the universe from nothing, and to do so, to make their point, they have to redefine what nothing is. Right, and essentially nothing, according to him, is something. It's a vacuum. It's a sea of fluctuating energy. You have to do such gymnastics to then reconsolidate things, right? So the most rational, intuitive explanation is that the universe and everything that exists was created by a cause. Now, which cause we can discuss later once you acknowledge that there is a cause, a creator. That's a different discussion. But to bring that in before and prior to acknowledging there's a creator is just a red herring. You're just shifting the goalpost.
Right, final question of the evening, just in time with 3 minutes left. Everything within the universe, meant to say is, I assume, are limited by three variables: matter, space, and time. The creator must be outside of these. Limitations of existence. So how can we assume a creator we cannot comprehend has to be observable in order for the existence of a creator to be rational?
Well, what you've done there is an ad hoc fallacy. You've created another claim in an attempt to bolster the first claim. You're saying, I can't produce evidence for my God, therefore I'm going to imagine that there's a supernatural place where evidence cannot be seen. This is a circular argument.
Can I just comment on that? Yeah. I think that's a brilliant question because it exposes John's position from the perspective that he's acknowledged that science is the only way to truth for him. Hence, everything has to be understood empirically. But when we're talking about God's existence, at least from the Islamic perspective, we are talking about the creator of everything that exists. And you've mentioned, I think in your book that, or in one of your videos, you mentioned that this cause we don't find him in the universe. Of course you're not going to find him in the universe because he created the universe and everything that exists. And to then ask for empirical data for a being that's beyond his material creation is absurd. That's another absurdity, right? This is ridiculous. You can't do that.
You do see you're making a claim, don't you? That there is somewhere outside the universe?
I'm trying to highlight to you that existence is far greater than the material observable reality that science can deal with. We have other truths which are right. Moral claims, morality is something we've been discussing today, which is non-material. Science doesn't have a foot in the door when it comes to explaining where morality comes from. It's amoral. Right? So when it comes to the existence of God, we're talking about metaphysics here. These are things beyond the physical. Hence, when we talk about God's existence, science doesn't have a foot in the door. And until and unless you're willing to broaden your horizons as far as your understanding of what constitutes to knowledge, you're not going to ever find God.
You want me to accept woo?
No, I'm telling you to acknowledge what science itself acknowledges, that there are other routes to knowledge which science incorporates. And you're going against all of that. You're going against the very method you follow.
Astrology?
I'm allowing back and forth to happen because there's literally 1 minute left of this event, but can we both not?
That's it. So yes, brilliant question. I think to inquire about God's existence, that particular question, I think you have to acknowledge first and foremost that there are other routes to knowledge, and most, I would even say most sensible, intelligent human beings, including atheists, would acknowledge, understanding that there are other routes to knowledge, and then to realize if we're talking about a being which is not a part of his material physical universe, which transcends the material, then we have to try to figure out and maybe employ argumentation. See are the arguments for God's existence. See what other realities there are which can, or routes to knowledge there are which can lead us to his existence. Now, time doesn't permit me to go into this, but we also have the concept of the fitrah from the Islamic perspective, which refers to this innate type of knowledge. So there's a lot that's going on there. And again, maybe for another debate.
I believe, I know you have a question, you may want just come and speak to one. I'm sure either one of you are happy to speak afterwards, maybe perhaps.
Sure.
I think we are at the end of the event, so I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank both speakers.
John, it was a pleasure.
Yeah,
Very nice meeting you.
Likewise.
We should keep in touch. I'd like to give to you this book.
Sure.
It's written by a guy named Hamza Andres Dortzis.
I've got this.
You got it?
On Kindle.
We got a physical copy now.
Because, oh, thank you.
Yes, yours.
I'll get him to sign it.
Yep.
Because I'm debating him in the near future at Teesside University.
It was supposed to happen last week,
Yes,
but it didn't
was,
happen for
but,
some reason.
they don't have such a good organizer as you have here.
Yeah. This was
You
brilliant.
have Imam. She's brilliant. They don't have Imam.
Excellent. But it would be nice to stay in touch.
Yeah,
You can take my
absolutely.
number as well. It would be good to stay in touch.
I'd like that.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hello.